The desert looks empty, miles of sand stretching to the horizon, endless heat shimmering in the daylight. Nothing to hide behind, nothing to move through. But when night falls, the desert transforms. Helicopters slice through the darkness like blades. Dust storms explode across the ground, swallowing entire units. Shadowy figures fast-roped into hostile territory. Boots hit sand, weapons snap into position. What looks lifeless by day becomes a war zone by night. This isn't a real war, but it's treated like one. Because the forces training here aren't ordinary soldiers. They're among the most elite fighters on Earth. British Royal Marines, Commandos, and elite units from the United States Marine Corps. And they aren't training together. They're hunting each other, ambushing each other, outmaneuvering each other, breaking each other's plans under real pressure. This is Exercise Green Dagger, one of the most intense joint desert warfare exercises in the world. And every year, it quietly rewrites how modern special operations are fought. The rivalry forged here wouldn't just build better soldiers, it would reshape modern warfare itself. If you enjoy real elite military stories most people never hear, subscribe now, because this one only gets more intense. Because Green Dagger wasn't created for competition. It was created because warfare had changed. By the late 20th and early 21st century, the world's most dangerous conflicts were no longer happening on European battlefields. They weren't being fought in forests or along clear front lines. They were happening in the desert, across the Middle East. Armed groups mastered the terrain. They used the vast open spaces to hide. They blended into villages. They struck coalition forces with hit-and-run attacks, then vanished back into nothing but heat and sand. Conventional armies struggled. Large formations were easy to spot, slow to maneuver, predictable. Every convoy became a target. Every patrol risked ambush. Every engagement revealed the same truth. Modern desert warfare wasn't about who had the biggest force. It was about who could move smarter, who could strike faster, who could adapt first. Coalition leaders realized something dangerous. The United States and Britain had some of the most elite troops in the world, but they had developed very differently. The Royal Marines specialized in small, aggressive commando operations, long stealth infiltrations, deep patrols behind enemy lines, silent movement for miles across hostile terrain, surprise over firepower. A handful of men in the right place at the right moment could collapse an entire enemy position. Meanwhile, the United States Marine Corps excelled at speed and overwhelming force. Rapid helicopter insertions, coordinated assaults, heavy use of air support, shock and momentum-breaking resistance before the enemy could react. Both approaches were deadly. Both had proven themselves in real wars. But real conflicts were now being fought by coalitions. British units fighting beside Americans, sharing airspace, sharing battlefields, sharing missions. And when chaos hit the desert, even elite forces struggled to sync perfectly. Different rhythms of movement, different command styles, different expectations. Small misunderstandings could cost lives. So military planners created something new. Not a classroom drill, not a scripted exercise, but a brutally realistic battlefield. A place where British and American elite units would fight together and against each other, where mistakes would be exposed instantly, where ego would be replaced by hard-earned respect. Green Dagger was built to simulate real missions, counter-terror raids on hidden compounds, night assaults in open desert, tracking insurgent cells across harsh terrain, rescuing hostages under extreme pressure. Nothing was easy. Nothing was predictable. Units rotated roles. One day British commandos hunted. The next, they became the enemy, setting ambushes, laying traps, exploiting weaknesses. The goal wasn't to win. The goal was to learn, to break old habits, to build a coalition force that could fight as one seamless machine. Because the next real battle wouldn't wait for coordination. It would happen in seconds, and whoever adapted fastest would survive. But when Green Dagger first began, it wasn't smooth, it was chaos. Because it brought together two elite forces with two very different ways of war. On one side stood the Royal Marines, small aggressive teams, masters of stealth. They believed in slipping deep behind enemy lines, moving quietly for hours, sometimes days, striking suddenly, then disappearing before the enemy could react. Surprise was their weapon. Independence was their strength. They were used to making decisions on the ground, operating far from support, relying on endurance, silence, and precision. Across from them stood elite US Marine units. Their power came from speed and coordination. When Americans hit a target, they hit it fast. Multiple assault elements moving at once. Helicopters roaring overhead, firepower raining down, shock and momentum crushing resistance instantly. Where the British slipped in quietly, the Americans slammed in hard. Both sides were confident. Both sides were proven. Both sides believed their method was superior. And when those philosophies collided in the desert, sparks flew. Early Green Dagger exercises were full of miscommunications, different timing expectations, different command rhythms. Operations that looked perfect on paper collapsed in real time. Ambushes failed. Raids fell apart. Units ended up in the wrong positions, not because anyone lacked skill, but because they fought differently. Each side blamed the other. Each side believed the other's method was flawed. The British thought Americans were too loud, too fast, too obvious. The Americans thought British commandos were too slow, too cautious, too focused on stealth. Green Dagger was doing exactly what it was designed to do. Breaking comfort zones, exposing weaknesses, forcing adaptation. Then the exercise shifted, and the rivalry truly began. Units started rotating roles. One side became insurgents. The other became the assault force. Hunters became hunted, and everything intensified. Royal Marines leaned into what they did best. Under cover of darkness, small teams moved silently for miles, using dunes for cover, using shadows as concealment, using the vast open desert that most forces struggled with. More than once, US patrols advanced confidently to war targets, only to be hit from multiple directions. British commandos struck, then vanished. By the time Americans reacted, there was nothing there but footprints in the sand. Entire patrols were caught off guard, wiped out in training scenarios before they even knew the enemy was near. But the United States Marines adapted fast. Instead of slow advances, they turned speed into a weapon. Helicopters thundered in at dawn. Multiple assault elements hit positions simultaneously. Air coordination pinned down defenders before British teams could melt away. Positions that took hours to stalk were overwhelmed in minutes. Sometimes Royal Marines thought they had perfect concealment, only to see helicopters drop Marines directly behind them. Other times, American units walked straight into brilliantly planned British traps. Every exercise became a chess match. Stealth versus speed, surprise versus shock, patience versus momentum. Every success was studied. Every failure dissected. Tactics were rewritten overnight. What worked once wouldn't work again, because the other side had already adapted. And slowly, something changed. The rivalry stopped being about proving who was better. It started becoming about learning. Respect replaced ego. The turning point had arrived. The United States Marines began noticing something. The British weren't just lucky with ambushes. They were patient. They moved differently. Instead of rushing objectives, they flowed around them, using darkness, using terrain, using silence as a weapon. So American units slowed down. Noise discipline became ruthless. Patrols tightened. They practiced longer infiltrations, stealthier approaches, striking only when the moment was perfect. At the same time, the Royal Marines were learning from the Americans. They saw how quickly US forces mobilized, how helicopters could reshape the battlefield in minutes, how multiple assault elements could overwhelm defenders before they could react. British Commandos began integrating speed into their plans, using air power as a weapon, pressing advantages instead of disappearing after every strike, coordinating larger follow-on forces. The old lines blurred. Americans became quieter. British Commandos became faster. And when they started operating together, the results were terrifyingly effective. Joint teams could infiltrate unseen for miles, launch lightning-fast assaults, coordinate air support flawlessly, adapt instantly when plans broke down. What once took hours now took minutes. What once required massive formations could now be handled by small, elite groups. Green Dagger had transformed from competition into evolution. It became a living laboratory of modern warfare, stealth fused with speed, precision fused with power. And the battlefield would soon feel the impact, because what happened in the desert didn't stay in training. When coalition forces deployed to the Middle East, the terrain looked almost identical to Green Dagger. Vast open spaces, hidden enemy cells, compounds used as strongholds, ambushes waiting along patrol routes, and suddenly the lessons learned in training became life-saving reality. In Iraq, joint operations moved faster and cleaner than ever before. British Commandos and American Marines no longer struggled to sync tactics. They already understood each other's rhythm. Stealth infiltration teams quietly located targets. Moments later, rapid helicopter assaults slammed into position. Surprise and speed working together. In Afghanistan's deserts and remote valleys, the same playbook played out again and again. Small joint patrols moved deep into hostile territory, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days, tracking insurgent networks exactly as they had in training. When contact was made, they struck with overwhelming coordination. Air support arrived instantly. Assault elements hit from multiple directions. Targets were secured before enemies could scatter. Counter-terror missions followed the same pattern. Hidden compounds breached at night. High-value targets captured or eliminated. Hostages rescued under extreme pressure. The tactics weren't improvised. They were rehearsed, over and over, in the heat and chaos of Green Dagger. Veterans later described real missions that felt almost familiar. The terrain, the pressure, the speed. It was like stepping straight back into the exercise. Only now lives were on the line. Green Dagger had become the blueprint for modern coalition warfare. Every ambush survived in training. Every failure corrected. Every tactic refined. All paying off in real combat. What began as rivalry had created superiority. The early clashes weren't about ego in the end. They were about evolution. British stealth forced Americans to think smarter. American speed forced British commandos to strike faster. Each side took what the other did best and fused it. Small teams now operated with the backing of lightning-fast assaults. Silent infiltrations flowed directly into overwhelming coordinated strikes. Precision met power. Stealth met speed. What once seemed like opposite philosophies became one of the most effective fighting styles in modern warfare. Not massive armies grinding forward, not lone teams operating in isolation, but elite groups working seamlessly together, moving quietly, striking fast, adapting instantly. The rivalry that once caused friction created an advantage no enemy expected. Green Dagger proved something powerful. Modern wars aren't won by size alone. They're won by forces willing to learn, to adapt, to evolve together. Small teams plus overwhelming speed, precision plus power. All born from a desert exercise that turned competition into cooperation. Green Dagger wasn't designed to crown winners. It was designed to break habits, to force growth, to prepare elite forces for the wars that were coming. And in doing so, it quietly changed how modern warfare is fought. Because the future didn't belong to the biggest army. It belonged to the smartest teams, the fastest adapters, the forces willing to learn from each other. If you enjoy real stories of how elite forces reshape modern warfare behind the scenes, subscribe for more, because the next story might change how you see modern combat forever.